Hi, I'm Leslie Maddox, an engineer turned homeschool mom, and I like to talk about the nitty gritty of homeschooling, especially how to homeschool with modern methods and minimal fuss. But today I thought it was time for another Am I the A-hole homeschool related post. I will put a link to the original post on Reddit down in the description box below. So check that out if you want to read it for yourself, if you want to get into all the comments, because sometimes it's fun just to go straight to the comments, right? I'll give you my opinion about whether or not this lady who posted is an a-hole in this situation. And then we can talk about the situation itself and how it might apply to our lives and how to deal with it. This post is, Am I the a-hole for refusing to let my sister-in-law use our homeschool materials? Even with that title, maybe you've thought of a situation of a time when you've been in this situation. All right, so starting off, my family and I are lucky enough to live in a fairly rural area. One of the few disadvantages of living in a rural area, however, is that there are not any preschool options until a child is 5 and can enter a lottery for a place in the one run by the local public school. Our twins are 4, and while we would not push academics at this age, they have shown interest in reading and math, and it seems disrespectful to them to put off lessons. I put homeschool in quotations because at our children's age, we're not officially homeschooling. Okay, so this lady has twin 4-year-olds, and wow, she must be pretty busy, but still her kids are academically curious. She's seen that, and she wants to um, serve that need and let them dig into some academic concepts because it looks like something that they'd like to do. Okay, so we follow a Montessori-based parenting philosophy, so it made sense for us to also use the Montessori method for these early academics. Yeah, so Montessori, if you're not familiar, and I'm only a bit familiar with the Montessori method, but from what I understand, it's a child-led approach, like when it comes to education, it's a child-led approach to education, very hands-on. I believe the idea is that you provide, like you set up the environment. So there are different things that they can play with, different activities they can do that have some educational value, and they get to choose what to do. And then the teacher, for example, in a Montessori school, she's not going to teach like they're standing at the board or with a textbook. She is there to guide the student instead of directly teaching them. If you know better than me about this, go ahead and comment below. But that's my understanding of it. So this mom is taking a Montessori-based approach to parenting. It sounds like she's really done her homework. And she's really invested in raising her kids the best way she knows how, and is really willing to do the work and to learn. And because it does require some learning to be able to be that guide when it comes to Montessori. Like those Montessori teachers, they're not just some random person off the street with a background check. They have been highly trained in order to guide in those educational endeavors. So it sounds like she's really done the work. Okay, so she's wants to use Montessori education for her kids, at least while they're at home with her for preschool. Continuing, there are a lot of lovely materials used in the Montessori method, and to be frank, they are not cheap. No, they're not cheap. They're really not. They are lovely materials. They're beautiful. A lot of times they're wooden materials, high quality. And since the Montessori approach is also very hands-on, there's a lot of them. So like they're not going to sit with a textbook studying geography. You know, you're going to have some hands-on way to do that. So they're high quality and there's a lot of them. I visited a little Montessori cottage school once because I was thinking about one of my kids going there, and there's so much. It's all beautiful and attractive to the kids, which is why that works. But there's a lot of materials. I couldn't imagine spending that kind of money on all of those materials. It's a lot. So yeah, these materials are not cheap. Some are easy and inexpensive to DIY, but others are not. Okay. My nephew is 7 and his school is currently doing distance learning. To be blunt, this method does not suit him. According to my sister-in-law, the school has all but officially stated that he is going to be held back for a year. She is livid and determined to not let that happen. Okay, so the mom with the 4-year-old twins has a nephew who's 7 doing distance learning, which actually can work really well for some kids who are very distracted by what's going on around them, and that can get in the way of their education. But for other kids, it's not going to be as successful if they're not able to pay attention to like this video-based learning, and if they don't have a parent who can really focus on helping them with that. So this poor kid sounds like he's not meeting academic objectives. And the sister-in-law has good on her for determining, hey, like I realize I need to step up and really help my son. And we don't know why he was having issues. Maybe it's just a distance learning. Maybe there's some educational disability at play that they don't know about. But she's determined to help him. But then we see that she has demanded the use of the materials that this mom of the 4-year-old twins is using for her kids, with her kids. And that's, wow, that's quite a leap from my 7-year-old is struggling to being like, you, give me your materials. Materials you're using with your 4-year-olds, give them to me. I need them. All right. She has demanded the use of our materials. My husband and I said no for several reasons. Tell me, I want to hear your reasons. Okay. Number 1, our children are regularly using the beads, which would be of most use to our nephew. Yeah, so the beads, the Montessori method, I've seen these special beads that you can get. Think of like those rods and this is for math, for learning math concepts and adding and all that kind of thing. Think of the math rods that you can get, or like if you're familiar with math, you see the math blocks, the number blocks, except these are little beads that are put on strings and then they hook. So there's a little a wooden hangy thing that you could, that with the numbers on them, and that you can hang the different beads from. And you can presumably do all sorts of guided activities to learn different math concepts, for the kids to learn different math concepts. And so looks like this mom has identified, the mom of the 4-year-old twins has identified that, hey, the 7-year-old is learning different things than my 4-year-olds. The 4-year-olds, I would guess, are learning basic math concepts, which is where they would need the beads, recognizing numbers, counting, one-to-one correspondence, maybe some simple addition and subtraction. So they would need that. But then they're also learning probably, identifying letters and letter sounds, and doing some blending of sounds, and maybe doing some simple reading. And you would think that the 7-year-old's already done some of those things. So a lot of the materials that those 4-year-olds are using wouldn't even be appropriate maybe for the 7-year-old. And this mom has recognized that the thing that he would really need are those beads. But she's using those beads because they can be used for the 4-year-olds and then on for several years as they increase in or move along in learning their math concepts and math skills. So she's identified those are what he really needs, but I'm using them. So yeah, she's using them. Like, that should be enough, right? Number 2, our nephew is rough on things. My sister-in-law is not the best about repairing or replacing them. Yeah, I think it really is good advice to not let anyone borrow something of yours if you ever want to see it again, because that can ruin a relationship really fast. So yeah, they need those things, and they need them in good working order, and they're expensive. And so she's concerned about breaking them. And honestly, even if he wasn't rough on things, I have a child who's very rough on things, and he just is. It's not, some kids just are, but even if he wasn't rough on things, anything can happen. and people just lose things or things break. Um, so it's one thing if you don't need those things, but if you do need them, that's another issue. Okay, number 3, there's talk about the local elementary school being closed and consolidated into one county elementary. Our kids will have to travel over an hour to school each day if that happens, and so we may end up actually homeschooling. So we don't want to have to replace these materials. So yeah, so right now it looks like they're homeschooling, kind of homeschooling. They're doing educational activities at home for preschool. But it sounds like they are planning to send their kids to their local elementary school unless these kids are going to have over an hour to school each day. I mean, wow, that's a lot for a 5-year-old, especially considering that they might spend more time on the road than they should actually be doing academic or educational activities per day anyway. A 5-year-old should definitely be working like maybe an hour, hour and a half, depending, and that should be enough for them for school. And if they're going to spend more than that time on the road, that's tough. So she's thinking ahead, thinking, not only am I using these materials now, but I'm going to need them in the future, or I may need them in the future. And we already put money into these materials, and we don't want to do that again. Okay, our family is very torn by the issue. Some say we're being selfish and teaching our children to be selfish. Others say we are right and should not cave to her demands. My issue is that no, I don't want to reward her bad behavior, but I also don't want to punish him, the nephew, for it. I have no clue if more hands on materials would help him. I do know that if he fails and we didn't loan them to him, then not only would I always question the result, but his mom would never let it die. My husband is a firm no, and I think I'm too torn to pick a side. So, Reddit, am I the a hole? All right. A mom has homeschool materials that she's using with her kids. A relative sees her using the materials, her kid's struggling, and she thinks, aha, I know how to solve this problem. I need those materials that other person's using, and has demanded them. And when the answer is no, looks like she's made her case to other family members, and now people are taking sides about who's right and who's wrong in this situation. So let's think of it another way. Imagine that instead of asking for homeschool materials for a child to use, because I feel just that image is a little bit manipulative, because it's very personal when you're thinking about a child that everyone loves. Like, they all love this little 7-year-old boy who's struggling in school, and they all want him to succeed. And so that makes things very divisive very quickly if there's a no. If someone is told, no, you can't take my things to use for this kid to use, that's very personal, manipulative. So imagine it's something else. Imagine it's a car. Imagine that uh, the sister-in-law and says, hey, you have a car, I need a car, I need that car more than you do. Let me have your car. Let me borrow your car for a while. And imagine the mom said, well, no, I'm using that car. And then the sister-in-law gets mad and says, how dare you tell me no? I need that car. Everybody listen to how this lady won't give me her car. Or imagine that it's just money. Imagine she says, hey, I need to borrow a few $100s. And our poster here says, well, I'm sorry, but we don't have a few $100s to lend. We need that for our bills. I'm so sorry. But then the sister-in-law says, well, I need that money more than you do. Give me your money. Then it becomes very clear that this mom of twins is not the a-hole, in my opinion. I don't think she is. It should be enough just to say, when someone wants your things, to say, I'm sorry, but we're using those. She could even say, these are essential to my kids' educations right now, and I can't lend them out. And that should be enough. That should be enough. Or maybe there's another situation, like, have you been in this situation where you have homeschool materials that you've used with an older kid and you plan on using them with one of your younger kids coming up, but someone sees that you have the materials and that you're not using them right now and asks asks to borrow them. Have you been in that situation where you have to explain to someone, "I'm sorry, but in an effort to be financially responsible, I'm hanging on to homeschool materials until all my kids are done using them. That way we don't have to repurchase. But I'd be happy to let you know where I bought them. I can send you a link." So that's totally reasonable as well to respond in that way to that situation. That should be enough. And when you see a post like this, you think, why is this even a discussion? Why are people taking sides on it? It seems obvious that someone doesn't need to give up their belongings to someone else just simply because they're demanded. um, but I can see where this lady's coming from because I can imagine a time in my life when I was a younger woman where I would have felt that pull that she's feeling, or this sense of responsibility, this sense of wanting to help out this other child, this a loved family member, um, where you've told someone no, but then they get demanding, and you question yourself and think, "Oh, am I being a jerk here? Am I in the wrong?" Because I never would demand something like that unless it was the right thing to do. So surely they wouldn't do the same thing. Surely they wouldn't have the audacity to demand something of me that's not their right to have. Um, but as an older woman, I now know that there are absolutely people out in the world who will take advantage of the average person's desire to be agreeable, to be seen as a nice person. That's what gives them the audacity, knowing that that has worked for them in the past, where someone um, has set a boundary, they've crossed the boundary and been demanding and forceful, maybe done a little bit of gaslighting, made them feel like they're the one in the wrong, like what they think is reasonable is not actually reasonable, and then had the person succumb to them, to just give in to their demands. There are absolutely people who will do that, not just with homeschool materials, um, but with anything you have, with your money, even with how you're treated. There are absolutely people who will behave like that. So tell me, have you been in that situation where someone's asked for homeschool materials? How did you handle it? But in this situation, I think there's kind of more to it than just the borrowing of homeschool materials. I think there's also an issue with this idea that these Montessori beads or these supplies are magical somehow, that they're going to help the kid. It's like, I mean, we don't have the whole story here. We just have what's written down, right, in this Reddit post. But it felt like quite the leap to me to go from my kid's struggling, so I need your things. That shouldn't be your first step uh, when helping your kid achieve an academic objective. It shouldn't be someone give me what you're using to help your kid reach their academic objective and it'll just magically work. No, there's a learning process that the parent needs to go through to figure out how to help their child, to understand what's needed, and how to help their kid reach that academic objective. Like if this is not your first time here, you know that I don't have a degree in education. I have an engineering degree, which means that I was trained to figure things out, and that's what I did. That's what I continue to do. Um, for like reasons specific to my family that my kids needed me to really be involved in their education, and so that eventually realized homeschooling was the best thing and for us in the short term and then also in the long term. And so I continued to have to learn every year how to help my kids reach their academic objectives, how to homeschool them. That's not something like there's no magic curriculum that's gonna solve all my problems, that's gonna fill in all the blanks for me. There's no magic homeschool material that's going to make it all happen. Like all of those things, the curricula, the homeschool supplies, those are just tools to help you help your kids achieve their academic objectives. But you have to learn how to use those tools. The tools in the hands of someone who doesn't know how to use them are worthless. So in this situation, it seems like the sister-in-law is really, maybe she's seen that these 4-year-old twins are learning a lot, but she's not there to see how they're learning all that, like the work that is involved. What just seems like play, what seems like nothing, to her is actually a lot of work and time and effort from the kid's mom. And even if the 4-year-old's mom says, hey, you know what, you can have it all. Just take it all. It's all yours. Help your son. Even if she did all that, there's no promise that that's what's going to solve her son's academic struggles. That's not going to solve all those problems. And so this is another situation we find ourselves in sometimes as homeschool parents, where we have people ask us questions like, how do I homeschool? Or, they want easy solutions. They say like, what curriculum should I use for this? I've had that happen for sure. Or someone just wants you to, they just present to you, here's my kid, he's this age or she's this age, has some struggles, tell me what to do. And in my mind, I'm like, can I introduce you to Mr. Google? Like, that's a good place to start. You need to be willing to figure it out yourself. And it's not that simple. That's actually the reason why I first came up with, wrote a blog post all about here's how to get started with homeschooling, and done some videos and all, so that when I'd get those questions, I can just direct people to those. I just send them a link to the blog post, and I put links in there to materials and all. I say I can send a link to a video, just to let people know so that people can see for themselves and realize that they have to make some effort on their own. Like, I'm willing to help out with, and I love to talk about and have some conversations, but I can't do it for them. And then there's also a situation of, is this person someone who's gonna blame me if I do say, hey, you should use this curriculum, and it doesn't work? Their child still struggles, or they struggle to use the curriculum. Are they going to blame me for their kids' issues, when really the problem is that the parent needs to be really invested in educating her kids? So lots of thoughts there. I thought this was an interesting post because it speaks to the issue of when people want to borrow your homeschool materials, and kind of how to deal with that situation, telling them nicely that you're still using them, but you can help them find the materials on there and get them themselves. Like, you can direct them to where to purchase the materials, maybe to a couple of books that talk about homeschooling. So it speaks to that, but then also the whole idea of when you're homeschooling and you're invested in your kids' education, and someone comes along who wants those same benefits that your kids are getting from you educating them. They want those same benefits for their kid, but they want to take shortcuts. They don't want to do the work. What to do there. So let me know down in the comments what you would do in those situations. I've told you what I would do, what I would say to them, that I send them links to videos or blog posts so that they can wrap their heads around the fact that, yeah, it takes work. There's not like a simple shortcut solution. But what would you do in that situation, or what have you done in the past? I'd love to know. Let me know down in the comments, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.